Good day to you. My name is Tony Bellinger from the Fighting Men of Rhodesia YouTube series. My guest today is Dean Rusty Hustler of the BSAP. Welcome to you, Rusty. We'll call you Rusty. It's easier than Dean, actually. It rolls off the tongue better. So welcome to you. You're over there in Mafeking, and I'm here in Salisbury, Mud Island, Vumbazonke, with actually a very nice day today. I normally am dressed up with all sorts of stuff, but today it's a little bit warmer. So, and the weather there looks magnificent over your right shoulder.
Yes, it is. We're getting some rain shortly,
Oh,
which is
wonderful.
yeah.
The smell of rain in Africa is just absolutely unique, isn't it?
It is. It is. Yes. I'm lucky enough that I have a game reserve 5 kilometers from my house,
Oh,
and I get on my bicycle every morning and go cycling in the park, and we've got buffalo and rhino inside there. So it's when the rain has fallen, it's really nice to be in the park. Yes.
oh, fantastic. Rusty, give us an overview of where you came from, where you grew up, and how you actually ended up in the police.
Okay, so I was born in Gatuma in 1948. My father was in the police force, and we did various stints in various towns, as all policemen do. We went to Gwello, Umtali, Salisbury, and back to Gwello. He was in Signals Corps. I ended up in chaplain school and finished off my schooling there. And I was awaiting my GCE results, and a few little family disputes took place, and I ended up phoning Army headquarters in 1967, and I said, I want to do my national service. So they said, well, where are you? And I said, Gwello. So they said, can you be at the Gwello station at 10 o'clock tonight? So I said, yes. I rushed off to town, had a haircut, got back, and my dad came back from the office, and he said, where the hell do you think you're going? So I said, I'm going to do my national service. He said, fine. And that was that. They put me on the train, and off I went to Llewellyn Barracks, 87th intake, C Company, and ended up doing my 9 months. But my dad had a little twist for me there. Because of being in signals, he knew lots of the sergeant majors and people in Llewellyn Barracks, and I hadn't passed my English exams. So instead of me going to the pub in the afternoons, I had to go and do correspondence courses and finish my English exams. So we ended up doing our normal stint. I then was transferred to signals in the army, which I wasn't very happy about because I knew what it would end up in, carrying a TR-28 or the likes around with me. And we then ended up in Kariba and did our 4.5 month stint in Kariba. And we demobbed in December 67. I then went we demobbed, and I was staying in Salisbury with friends of my family. And they said, so what are you going to do with yourself now? So I said, well, I'm going to go to the Electricity Supply Commission and apply for an apprenticeship, which lasted about 4 weeks because I had an argument with my journeyman. I wasn't very happy with him, and I left before I was charged with assault or something like that. And then when I was at home that night, the bloke I was staying with was also in the force, the BSAP. And he said to me, well, what are you going to do? So I said, well, I'm either going to go back to the army and maybe apply for SAS or something like that. He said, well, why don't you just go to the police? So I went to police headquarters. And when I got there, I was interviewed by the board, and they looked at me and they said, so you Ben Hustler's son? So I said, yes. So they said, well, does your father know that you're here? So I said, no, he doesn't. And they stopped the interview, and they phoned my father to say, do you know that your son's here? So he said, no, I don't know. And he's got a mind of his own. So get on with the interview. And that was that. And I ended up in depot from about the 7th of January the following year. And did a whole year of training in because we were display squad. In December, I was transferred. Again, it was one of these things where you didn't want to go to a district or a province where family was where family members were, but they did that, and I was sent to Belingwe in Midlands Province, where my father was head of signals for the whole of the province. So I ended up in Belingwe, and I did 4 years in Belingwe. And 1972 was one of our busiest years because I met a farmer's daughter there, and we eventually got married, and we had our first child in 1972. I got promoted to section officer in 72 and was posted to my own police station, Featherstone, in 1972. That was a big farming area. And at the same time, whilst I was in Belingwe and in Featherstone and Redcliffe, I was in Partu. So I spent a lot of time on Partu training, and I met a lot of the instructors. And eventually in 77, when we were in Redcliffe, there was radio signals that came through asking for volunteers for support unit. So I had a long chat with the family, and I said, we're moving there. So we transferred to Salisbury. I was at Redcliffe at the time, and joined support unit. I think it was the 7th of January, 1977. And obviously arrived in, our headquarters was at Tomlinson Depot. And I arrived there and met Jimmy Collins, who was the OC, and we were promptly put into a training course and did about 3 or 4 weeks training as troop commanders, because then the support unit was troops. I think there was 10 troops or 11 troops. After the training, I was put in charge of Charlie Troop, and I travelled to Triangle to pick up the troop, and took over the troop from Bug Stutterford. Barry Wone had recently been injured, and the whole troop was in a little bit of a disarray. They'd had a hard time, and they were sort of on a rest period in Triangle.
How many men were in a troop, Rusty?
Approximately 30 altogether. It was the same size as sort of a platoon of a normal infantry regiment. And
that troop was one of 3 in a company, is that right?
That was later on.
Okay.
The companies and support unit were formed later on in around about 78, 79.
I believe it ended up with 12 companies of 125 men, 1,500 men altogether.
That's correct. Yes.
At the point you're talking about, it's still a troop. Okay, carry on. Thank you.
Still troops, yeah. So I ended up with Charlie Troop, and one of my first deployments, I was sent to 151 Alpha, which was the camp near Rhodesia, and we were sent on various trips, and one of the ones was when we went to Beppe Hills, and there'd been some movement there of our friends, and we were walking in at night time, and I had the whole troop with me. And one of my sergeants, a very good sergeant, Sergeant Chiromo, came to me and he said, Ishay, can we stop, please? There's been a little bit of a problem at the back. And so I said, what's the problem? He said, no, Sergeant Gooney had to deal with a curfew breaker. So I said, fine, let's just get on with it. and off we carried on. And we were following up on a Selous scout that had been kidnapped and taken into that Beppe Hills area. But unfortunately, we didn't manage to catch up with them. But one of the nights we were there, we were up on an OP, and we had the mine below us was attacked. And we went down there, but they'd already escaped. That was the start. That was my introduction to moving with the troops and moving with my Charlie Troop. I had a fantastic headquarter troop myself, a stick of 4. And that was myself, Sergeant Chiromo, Constable Totowea, and Constable Ndlovu. Totowea was my machine gunner, and Ndlovu was his 2IC carrying the belts. And Totowea was a very tall guy, and we would call him, and that was his Totowea. Anyway, we went back to 151 Alpha, and on another occasion, my commander at that stage was Superintendent Tom Nordier, a fantastic officer, absolutely fantastic guy, and I got on extremely well with him. And he called me in, and he was a type of guy that always sitting, looking at his maps and studying them. And he asked me to come in and sit with him. And he said, Hustler, we've got movement down in the Rhodesia mountain area. And he said, I think that we must deploy your troop down there, a night deployment, and break up into your 4 sticks and get into position up there with some in decent OPs. So we deployed that night in Crocodiles with our very trustworthy police reserve drivers, and they took us in and they dropped us about maybe 20 k's from Rhodesia Mountain, and we did have night vision at that stage, so we were able to use night vision to walk in and avoid the Majibas. Is that all right to use?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so I took my team up, my call sign up, Charlie 9, up to the top of Rhodesia Mountain, and we sat there for 2 or 3 days, and it was quite evident. Chiromo would say to me, look, Ishay, we don't want you in the front all the time. You've got plenty of other things to do. You stay away from the OP itself and keep at the back so that you can control and look after the rest of the call signs, which is, it was very good of them. And Totowea and Clovo also took turning going into the OP position. And Chiromo came to me the one day and he said to me, Ishay, look at my eye here. And it was twitching. And I said, so what does that mean, Chiromo? He said, Ishay, when that's happening, there's not friendly people around. So I said, okay. So we all moved into the OP position. So all 4 of us were there, obviously one of them looking backwards. And it continued. We had a crawl below us, and I could see a lot of movement going on there, but we hadn't seen any weapons. And what we did observe was 2 district internal affairs district assistants that had been led into the crawl, and they were in handcuffs. So I contacted Tom Nordier, and I said to him, look, Ishay, this is the situation. We've got 2 guys that have been captured, but I haven't seen any weapons. He said, well, you know the rule. You either, and I'd actually called in. I said, can we call in Fire Force because it's a hot area. So he said, no weapons, no Fire Force. So I said, okay. And then we started to see movement, and they moved these 2 guys to a small area which was in front of where our OP was, to a little mountain area, but it's shaped like the boot of Italy, exactly the same. And I realized that there was something going to happen to these 2 DAs. So I radioed him in again, and he said, look, on your head, Hustler, you know what will happen to you. So I said, well, that's it. So, I believe that we've got a big scene going on. So we waited about 2.5 hours, and the next minute I got this call to say that Fire Force was on its way, and it was coming from Umtali. So we weren't too far away. And of course, that lovely sound of those beating blades coming, and the K car rose up as they normally do, and called me Charlie 9. Said, got comms, and he said, right, guide me in. So I said to him, you see that little map of Italy, the boot of Italy? He said, yes, I've got it visual. He said, fine. I said, that's the target area. And around he went, and the next minute he just said, K car's firing. And that's when all hell broke loose. There was firing going on, and the next minute the G cars were in doing drops. We had an RLI Fire Force, and it carried on for quite some time. I think eventually there was about 13 bodies altogether. And I said to him at one stage, KCAR commander, I said, do you want us to move off the OP and come down? Or he said, look, you haven't been seen. You stay where you are. As of all your other call signs, they haven't been seen. So rather keep still and we'll carry on. So they carried on until about 5, 6 o'clock and then wrapped up and went off. And then the next morning, when we got up, we saw people coming to collect bodies and things like that. And we stayed in that area for another 2 days. And then Tom said to me, he said, look, Hustler, I think you guys get out of there now and come back. But we did leave one call sign back there, just hiding. And when we got back, for some reason, the rest of the troop went down with Jippo guts. And so we were out for two or 3 days. And then Sergeant Gooney contacted me and he said, sir, we've got a funny sighting here. So he gave me the map references and he said, come in. We've got the place under observation. They're not going to move from there. And we went in and there was a guy sitting outside a hut. And he was acting very strangely. And he had some chimarenga cloths around him. So I said, right, let's go in and get this guy. So we went in and he acted dumb, to say the least. And so we started a bit of an interrogation and he wouldn't say anything. So we stripped him down and on his back, when we turned him round after taking his shirt off, he had all these shrapnel wounds on his back. And I said to him, I said, look, start telling the truth or else it's going to be a bit painful for you. Mm-hmm. And it was obviously shrapnel from KCAR. So we had a little chat with him and he didn't say where he was actually from. But I then radioed Tom Nodair and I said, we've got this guy. So he said, describe him. So we gave a description. And the next minute, SB got hold of me and they said, Hustler, you get here as soon as possible. We want that guy. And he turned out to be a sectorial commander for the whole of that Chiduku area. And he was eventually put on a few little stints with the scouts. And it was one of the best captures that we'd ever had.
Wow.
So that.
Did you recover the 2 district assistants? Were they killed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. They weren't killed. We managed to get them both out as well. But the RLI troopies got them out. Yeah. Yes. So then my next deployment, let's see, where we went to Belingwe area, my old stomping grounds, because it was unusual for a district policeman to do more than 2 years at a station. And I happened to do 4 years there, during which time on my very first patrol, this is not with support unit, it was the district branch. My member in charge said, you're going out on patrol. And he gave me a 500 Machi motorcycle. And I blew 2 tires in the same day. And eventually he said to me, he said, obviously you don't need a mechanized vehicle. I'll send you a bicycle now. And I had a Constable Dewa with me. I'll never forget his number, 12900. And I got this bicycle and he said to me, Ishay, don't worry. We'll just put it on Shoeshine bus service and we'll pick it up at the Mataga store and we'll carry on. And I learned so much. I spent 6 weeks on a bicycle in the Belingwe tribal trust land, and it was fantastic. But it put me in good stead for when I came back with the unit, because the guys, the chiefs and the headmen that I'd made contact with, and the witch doctors and Sukweros that I'd met, were still on sides. So I had a flow of information coming in, and we had one incident where I'd gone in and a number of the guys started running off the enemy, but our radios had packed up, and so we had no comms between ourselves, and it was pointless trying to chase after these guys if you haven't got proper comms. Anyway, we went back to our base camp in Yala Mine, which had quite a big runway on it. It was a chrome mine. And we were sitting there, and my sergeant major came to me, and I deployed all my call signs apart from the base camp call sign, which was a younger, who was the younger Sergeant Chiromo was staying with me at that time. Chiromo himself was out on patrol. And the sergeant major came to me and he said, Ishay, you know that there's something going on. Everybody's, the local people are all leaving the area. So I contacted the local SB rep and I said, have you got any int on new enemy around and that type of thing? And he said, no, he said, there's nothing, there's nothing. Just keep your call signs out as we discussed in ambush positions. So I said, fine, and we were anticipating a resupply for them. And eventually at about 12 o'clock that night, I was chatting to the radio operator who was a police reservist and the sergeant major. And we eventually packed up and I went to bed. And I was listening to LM radio on my little portable radio. And the next minute, I saw these tracer bullets coming towards my tent. And we obviously were under a camp attack. And it was quite heavy fire from them. And I jumped out with just my underpants on and my bare feet and jumped into our mortar pit. Now, I hadn't put boots on or anything, so I had this 60mm mortar with full charges, no shoes on, and started firing in the general direction of where the fire was coming from. I think I must have used about 20 bombs. And younger Sergeant Chiromo had opened up with an MAG because there was only about 10 of us in the camp. And gradually the fire stopped around about 4 o'clock in the morning. So we got up and we did a sweep. And at the end of the runway, which was about 1 kilometer away, we found two of our good friends lying there. And they had an 82 tube, which they'd been firing at it. But because of the rain, the tube had sunk deeper and deeper into the ground. So we were looking around the scene, and lo and behold, I found a flipping tape recorder. And they'd been taping the whole contact. Of course, when Special Branch came, they took it away and wouldn't give it back to me. And when I said to the SB rep, I said, well, now what about this resupply? Because they used these brand new M60 rifle grenades, both the grenades and the anti-tank stuff. So he said, oh, well, shit happens, doesn't it? so that was a big hit on us. But we managed to do follow-ups, and we caught, I think it was 4 or 5 after that attack. And we saw they were handed over.
Those guys with the 82mm tube, did they actually mortar themselves? Sounds like they did that.
No, the bombs had landed on the runway, but my bombs had hit them.
Oh,
I dropped 2 bombs into them that had wounded the team. So I was quite chuffed about it because I was firing blind.
When you were talking about the mud, and I picture the tube getting more and more upright, and then
yeah, it would have been poetic justice as well. So shortly after that, Tom Nordia called me in, and he said to me, your time with Charlie Troop is up. He said, you've had quite a successful time with Charlie. I said, he wants me to go and take over Hotel Troop. And that was a troop that had very poor successes. And they'd had a few issues internally. So I went into that, and I had 2 very good patrol officers. The one guy is Gary Goldie, and we ended up back at 151 Alpha, and I deployed them into the Chiduku TTL again. And Ginge Calloway, who was the other section officer, he radioed me the one morning, and he said, Isha, I've got guys doing PT in the field here. So again, I had Tom nor deal with me. And I told him, and he said, right, let's get Fire Force in. So we got Fire Force in, and both Gary and Ginge were working together. And Gary came to me, called me up, and he said, "Look, sir, I've got a waterfall, and there's guys that have gone in there." So I said, "Well, do the best thing, fire some Zulus in there or something," and which he did. And he said, "My goodness me, the water's just turned red." And he subsequently got shot through his shoulder, but carried on regardless through his back. And he got a commissioner's commendation for his work and gallantry that he did. Very good chap. I still keep in contact with him. And yeah, and we came back with sort of good battle honors for hotel troop. And so I stayed with them a little while longer. And then I was moved to headquarters as the unit chief inspector, or acting unit chief inspector, which was sort of the regimental sergeant major in terms of admin and those type of things. And during that time, Paddy Baldwin, who was the training commander, the two of us got together and he put me on a training course. And subsequently, I started going to the battle camp, and they transferred me from unit chief inspector to the battle camp under Paddy. And Paddy and myself worked for many, many years, many times, writing the tactic manuals and getting the training back up to scratch. Because we then had one battle camp, which was at Concession, which I'd been to during my retraining times, because we were 6 weeks out, 10 days back, and 7 days retraining. So I'd done the battle camp under him at Concession, and I knew exactly what I was putting myself into before going into training. And eventually, the battle camps were getting too much. The area was too small at Concession. So Paddy and I went and started scouting around, and we came across a couple of disused farms in the Shamva area, and it was big areas that we had. And we made contact with the local police station at Shamva, and we got authority for us to establish a huge battle camp up at Shamva. And that's where I spent 99% of my time retraining all the troops. And it was a battle camp where we retrained the guys on new tactics. The contact incident report books that we had to fill in, we took them from the guys and we went through it to see how tactics had changed. And so we adjusted our tactics according to that. And the battle camp always ended up with battle inoculation, where we had a river running through the battle camp. And we used that. It was about a kilometer run that the troops had to do in section battle drills. And we had a MHE on fixed firing line, a mortar, and various other things. And we would run behind the guys as we were going down the river, firing live. I only used live ammunition the whole time that I was in training. And they had given me a 2% injury rate. And the only time that ever happened, the support unit, the emblem being the Martial Eagle, we followed everything. So when a new recruit came in, he was called a Mazai, which is the egg. And then when he was going through training, he was a fledgling. So when we had Mazais, they used to come to the battle camp and they would carry all the extra ammunition behind each instructor, so that we didn't have to carry packs and things. Being typical instructors, we were doing so much running around. But they would run behind us. And the one guy with me, he was carrying extra hand grenades, the M60s, I think it was, the ones with the little shrapnel around them, not the Mills bombs.
Yeah.
So he said to me the one day, he said, "Ishay, what actually goes on when you do this?" So I said, "Well, we pull the pin and we throw the grenade, and then you duck down." And I said, "But don't you start looking or anything like that?" Well, as fate would happen, he did look, and he got a piece of shrapnel in his eye here. I said, I told you not to look. But yeah, the guys, I don't have a very good name in support unit because of the ruthlessness that we had in battle camp. But in years to come, many guys have contacted me and said, you know, Rusty, if it wasn't for you guys and the training that you gave us, we could be dead. And your training paid off. And I'm still very proud of it. And it's sorry. It was hard on the guys, but they eventually appreciated it. And because they didn't like coming back to retraining, you know, because it was haircuts and get rid of all those bangles and beads and get onto the parade ground and runs every morning with MAGs and their rifles, and so it went on. So yes, that and I believe that retraining and the battle camp work that we did was the backbone of the support unit and the discipline that we had, because those guys were really very well disciplined, and they worked extremely hard. So from that, things began to change. At one stage, I had an SAP team designated to me, and these guys were sent up from the training camp that they had. The name forgets me now. Belingwe, in South Africa, where they were training their coin guys, and they came up ostensibly to film all of our tactics and all our training. And eventually, when they went back, that core unit that had been with us formed the core unit of Kufut. And it's actually acknowledged in Kufut that the training and experience and tactics that we got were purely because of the time that we spent with the guys at the Shamba battle camp. Yeah. Which again, it was a feather in support unit's cap. But these guys were with us, but they allegedly weren't allowed to get involved. And at one stage, we had, I was fortunate enough at one time of the battle camp that we had 2 Land Rovers converted with the Spano Suiza 20mm machine guns from the old Vampires. And they were mounted on the back of these Land Rovers. And we had them at battle camp. So we would use one as a training one and one there because we were in a conflict area, we were allowed to have certain stuff like the rest of the guys because we could have been attacked as well. So Shamba police station came up, radioed us and said, listen, we've had a farm attack and there's a Batu stick following up on this farm attack, and the guys are moving into your battle camp area, and there's a crawl area down there. Can you get down there as soon as possible? So I had 3 of these guys with me, the SAP, and I had my 2 IC, a very dear friend of mine, Mike Franklin. And I said, come guys, we're going. So they said, where are we going, sir? I said, we're going into a contact. He said, no, but we're not allowed to. I said, well, that's your problem. You can sit in the Land Rover and we'll have the contact. Anyway, we got there, and the party stick used like flot indication, where they fired a flare into the area where they were. And I zoomed in with the 20mm and 5.2 HE explosives into this hut. Well, the explosion that took place was unbelievable. And then I said to them, I said, right, you take the rest of the huts. And these 3 guys took turns in emptying a couple of the big magazines of 20mm into all the huts. And we came away with a couple of good kills there as well. And but those guys were so appreciative of having been allowed to be in a firefight.
Fantastic.
And that was the time when it was 79, late 79, and the writing was on the wall. And they were getting jittery, and they eventually were flown out with 24 hours notice. And so came the elections, and we ended up changing almost immediately from our camo back into blues, and our whole all our actions, the companies had taken over, and the companies were now deployed to keeps and into the holding zones where the terrorists were being held, and the assembly points. And so we went back into a police mode, and that's when Mr. Hogg, Ian Hogg, he unfortunately passed away 2 weeks ago.
Mm.
He was our last commander of support unit, and he was a great inspiration for that time, because we now had to go from a transition of being fighting units to now like a peacekeeping unit. And so we went on to things like the police display, starting the police display, and that's where we trained our recruits in the Royal Navy gun teams. And it was very similar to what goes on every year in Britain with the gun teams, and then going over the ropes and all the rest of it. And it was a great success. So yes, and then we had a visit by the current PM of Zimbabwe. He came to visit support unit headquarters, and he made it quite clear that there was too many white officers in the support unit, and 20 of us handed our resignations in the next day. And that's when that big parade came up, where Don Rowlands was the commander. He was the inspecting officer, and I was the parade commander. And the inspection started taking place. The police band was there, and as the inspection was finished, so the heavens opened, and it started hailing. And the police band, who had their fezzes on, they were all filled with ice, but not one of our troops moved at all. And when it came for the parade continued, and I marched up to Don Rowlands, and I said to him jokingly, "Sir, permission to swim off, please, from the parade," and gave him the salute. And when I turned and gave them the march off, the troops in their shona started singing the support unit song, Amamai.
Mm.
Sorry.
Very moving, that.
Yeah, it was. And yeah, that was my final parade. And yeah, it was just sorry.
It's fine, don't worry.
It just brings back so much. It was something that I'd always wanted to be in the military. And even when I ended up here in Mafeking, I ended up in the Bophuthatswana Defence Force, and got my wings on chest, parabats, and all the rest of it. But those years in support unit, and yeah.
Rusty, for our foreign viewers, maybe they're not understanding some of the terminology we've used, so we can just go back a bit.
Yeah.
Because I believe, and I'm prepared to be corrected, because we never formally declared war on anybody in Rhodesia, the police remained the senior service throughout the whole war. It was actually considered a police action, even though we went on external raids into neighboring countries and all that. There was no declaration of war, so I'm prepared to be corrected. The police remained the senior service, and you had the uniform branch, which you were in, and then you had other parts of the police force, which was support unit. Your nickname was Black Boots because you actually wore black boots, whereas other policemen wore brown boots. And you became a paramilitary organization, which at the end was 12 companies of 125 men each. And I've operated with black boots up in the Vic Falls area. The one night, it also brings tears to my eyes, I was sitting on the bunker of a keep, and the sun was setting, and a couple of I think they're called platoons as well. They marched past singing, and it was, you know, I feel like crying as well. It was just so emotional. The African voices are just so beautiful, and
Yes.
so can you recall? I know you were involved in retraining, but can you recall some of the major successes that some of the companies had? Because obviously there's a lot of respect for our regular forces for what they did, but often we don't hear what us lesser guys did. What have you any stories that you could relate to us in that regard?
Well, as I say, with Hotel Troop, there was those guys, Gary Goldie and them, and then Daryl Brent, who you've interviewed, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
He had some very good contacts. Then there was Tim Hewitt, I think it was, and a number of the guys, got awards, medals for their leadership in battle and those type of things. And there's quite a citation of all the awards that are awarded to the Black Boots. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it had a very good reputation. I mean, I was aware of the police Black Boot reputation. Did you guys, because you had African soldiers, did you ever try doing any pseudo work, or was that just too technical?
Look, during the time in battle camp, and I forgot to mention that, and I'll come back to the SIS, the Special Investigations section that we had, which was before I went to support unit. That was formed in 1976, 75, 76. There was a couple of guys who were involved in that, and they were involved in pseudo work. But when we were at battle camp, sometimes we would do from Monday to Friday battle camp, and then we come home for the weekends back to Chikurubi barracks. Now, sometimes Special Branch would contact us, and where the battle camp was in Shamba, we had the Angwa River coming down below us, and in that area south of the battle camp was a big tribal trust land. So we often had calls for us to go in there. And over the weekends, it was like weekend warriors. I'd say to all my instructors, guys, do you need to go back? If you don't need to go back, we're going into the TTL, and we're going to go and do a patrol there. We've got some int. And the one time I went in with all my lead instructors, and we came to this crawl complex. Now, we were blackened up. I was carrying a Hungarian AMD AK, and I had an RPG-7 because the RPG-7 was one of my favorite weapons, along with my 20 mil. So, and we trained the guys in the use of the terrorist weapons. So we went into this area, and I was in the center walking in. And it was a strange thing that happened. As I was going in, my nose all of a sudden started bleeding, and I was wiping my nose. And I saw a guy sitting by a stump or next to the hut, and he bent down. And as he came up, he had a Chinese stick grenade with him. And so I pulled up my rifle and double tapped him. And he ran round the corner, and my sergeant major, who was coming round from the opposite side, was carrying an MAG and finished him off. And then the whole area just broke up with various people, and it was like Majibas running all over the place. So yes, that was a semi sort of pseudo operation that we did ourselves. But the SIS unit, I'm trying to think, Andy Gray, and there was a Phil Wright. They were all involved in that particular unit, and then they formed it. But it for some reason or other, and I know it's in the support unit book. A lot of the stories of the SIS unit. but it was never followed up. I think the war had got to the stage where it was getting too, we needed to consolidate more as opposed to going into those specialized units.
Yeah.
And I think also the army might have taken a little bit of, that they already had units like that. So yes, but yeah, there were times that it was done.
What did SIS stand for?
Is a Special Investigation Section, SIS.
Good Lord, the more the more I do these interviews, the more I learn. I've never heard of that unit, to be honest.
Okay, it was a couple of troops in support units that they were given specialized equipment. They managed to scrounge sniper rifles and those type of things. We in training, we also had our own sniper section as well. My very good instructor, Mike Franklin, myself, went on sniper courses, and he was very successful with his sniper training and operations that we did. So yes, there were times that there were those special little ops done. I mean, there was one occasion where we were nearly sent external. I don't think any support unit did go external, but we were up in the Matabeleland area, if I remember rightly, and we were at Gwai, and there was an external going on, but they needed some backups. So I went to the SB rep and I said to him, well, look, we all know how to get into, we chop and trade and all the rest of it. So if you need extra men, we can go. But it never materialized, unfortunately.
That was one of the questions I was going to ask you, if you actually ever went external, but I guess being police, you were restricted to Rhodesia.
Yeah, no, we never. There was one external where that team went in to go. I think there was a chief inspector captured or kidnapped or something like that, and that was into Botswana. There's something in the history books written about that, but that was a specialized team that went in. I think it was with Scouts.
And like most Rhodesian forces, we were all heliborne trained. But did you ever do fire forces as a set thing where you had choppers with a troop of your guys, or was that not your remit?
We did do fire force, imbusing and debusing and that type of stuff. But I don't recall us ever getting involved in an actual fire force enactment. I might be wrong, and the guys might be shouting and screaming at me now and saying, Hustler, you're talking a lot of nonsense. But I don't think so. We would have loved to have done it. But once again, I think that police, I know certainly the dog section, a lot of them were trained and went in with fire force units, individual guys. Yes.
I think it was a shortage of helicopters rather than a shortage of manpower.
Yes.
I think Rhodesia had about, 30 helicopters, and the rest we had to borrow from South Africa. So if we'd had 1,000 helicopters, we might have had fire forces in every unit. But no, that's very interesting. And because you had African troops, that's a tremendous advantage. We had, like when I was doing my national service, we were all white guys. The most I knew about Shona was Simulkwa or Garapuds or whatever, hurry up and wait sort of thing. Or sit down, that's all I could say. So the advantage of black troops is that you could sneak right up to a hut and listen to what's going on and glean a lot of information that way.
That was part of that SIS unit, that we were given tasks by ground coverage guys, and we would go in, we would put some of our black troops into the huts and listen to what was going on. But it was very dangerous. because they went in. We obviously weren't carrying pistols or anything like that with us, and so to go in with weapons was dangerous, and putting the guys in civvies, could cause problems. But that type of thing was going on with ground coverage units, and they were infiltrating where the what did they call them? The political commissars were holding those meetings, and we would put guys in there to listen to exactly what was being said. But it was I think it was frowned upon by the hierarchy at times that we did it.
Incredibly brave to do that, and the Selous Scout pseudo-African troops were, in my opinion, the bravest men in the forces, because to walk up to an enemy force and try and pass yourself off as a turd is just nothing short of genius, in my opinion.
Yes. No, well, I mean that whole concept, and when the whole concept of pseudo ops and even the white guys that went into pseudo ops, and they were immensely brave people.
Yeah. I mean, you couldn't even go and take a crap and showing white backside. It's just we were at such a disadvantage. But and then I think at some point you got involved in SWAT, but which stands for, if I'm not mistaken, Special Weapons and Tactics or something like that. Did you get involved in that in Rhodesian time, or was that later on in Zimbabwe?
It was when we got into Zimbabwe. What happened was we had a headquarter company in support unit that was formed. That was a special unit for riot drills and those type of things. And a number of the guys were very good weapon operators, etc. So they said we need to form a SWAT team, because at that stage there was a SWAT team in Salisbury and Bulawayo, and there was guys that had done the training, roping and that type of stuff, and because SWAT is Special Weapons and Tactics, as you said. So there was an aircraft that was coming from, I think it was from South Africa, which was allegedly hijacked, and they contacted me, and I'd done SWAT training with some Americans, and PGHQ, Police General Headquarters, got hold of us and said, look, we need to get somebody trained in aircraft penetration. So they asked me to take a team and go up to Salisbury Central Airport, and we were given an aircraft there, and I did training of penetration of aircraft in case that aircraft did come in. It was very quick, and after that, then PGHQ decided that the SWAT teams would fall under support units, especially in Salisbury. And so we did a selection course where I took a number of guys, both black and white guys, up to Inyanga. And we were very close to where the 5th Brigade was. So we had to mind our P's and Q's when we were up there. But we were given a beautiful homestead. And I had a wonderful area where I trained the guys in initiative tests and using special weapons and roping, abseiling, fly fishing, and a few other bits and
grenade.
But I had some very good guys that came out of that. In fact, the Chiromo brothers that were with me in Charlie Troop all ended up in Special Weapons and Tactics. And Neil Rates, God bless him, who became the commander of the SWAT team, he was with me up there. And unfortunately, he passed away a couple of years ago as well. But yes, so eventually Barry Wone, who was commander of the headquarter troop, He eventually took over command of that in as a running troop of the SWAT teams on the deployments and things like that.
I think that
Yeah.
I think that plane that was hijacked and might have landed in Harare was the one that went on to the Seychelles.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah,
We've had a couple of talks on that. And the South Africans developed ingress into an airplane, the record of which I believe has never been beaten to get men into a plane. I don't want to start sprouting statistics because people will shoot me down, but I believe they were incredibly efficient. What tactics were you given to get into a plane? How did you actually do that physically?
I'm trying to remember now, but I think it was through the bottom hatches that we were using. But it was also, it was so quick that we went up. We spent about a day there. It was nothing. It was purely going to be a defensive operation. It wasn't going to be that we would penetrate. But I mean, we didn't have the special bullets and that type of equipment. I think we only had P1s, pistols. So it was a very quick, and I had a team of about 5 or 6 guys that were with me. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Did you also do training to land on buildings with helicopters, abseiling and that type of thing?
I did courses with that, and we went up to the RLI was still going, and we did rappelling down walls, but it was purely the training teams, my training instructors and stuff, that we would pass that on, because we'd built a huge assault course at Chickaruby Barracks. I managed to get hold of a US Marine training manual, and I copied one of their assault courses and built that, much to the annoyance of our troops. They didn't like me for that assault course. I can assure you, it was a hell of a one. So we went on a training course to RLI Barracks, and under the command of the colonel in charge there, and he allowed us to go on that. And we were trained fully in all that rappelling and abseiling and coming out of the helicopter. Yeah, I was privileged on that, and I just loved my abseiling.
Did you have much pushback from the new black commanders in the Zimbabwean army? Did they give you grief?
No. Look, by the time 82 came, which was when I retired, we were still in the black boots. We weren't infiltrated by anybody, apart from what happened, which caused us to all resign. But the things that we did after that, or during that time, like our tug of war, we had tug of war in sports, but it was now formalized in that period. And I ended up as captain of the tug of war team, and we won the Bulawayo show and came back with the trophies. And then we had Mr. Ian Hogg initiated an international police relay race where we started in Mazoe and ran in teams from Mazoe to Chickaruby, ending up there. And we came about second. I think the Kenyans beat us, but we had all these teams from all over Africa coming up to run. And we employed a guy to run in our marathon team, Tap Jonga, who won a silver medal, I think, in the Commonwealth Games. But all of those, on the day of that first inaugural race, when the race had finished, we all arrived at the 151 in Chickaruby, the pub. And that was the day that KG6 Barracks was hit and blown up, the ammunition dumps. And I don't know if you know how far those barracks are from Chickaruby, but the blast that came through actually blew our pub doors open. And I ended up that night clearing, because I'd been doing bomb disposal as well. Ended up doing bomb disposal up near the KG6 barracks, where explosives had landed all over the place, mines and things like that.
Was that an accident or part of the Intimbani uprisings that started in Salisbury?
It was part of the Gericka, the guy that captured Fred Farquharson, and then and was involved in the Thornhill raids. They were part of that group, and he was an engineer, and he went and blew up the KG6 barracks, where all the excess ammo and stuff had been in Coma barracks. Sorry, not KG6, in Coma barracks. After the scouts had left, that became the big ammunition dump of all the stuff brought in from Intimbani and all those other places, and he went and destroyed it. That's it. Sorry, it was in Coma barracks, not KG6. KG6 was in town.
What was their motivation for doing that? What was the end result that they were hoping for?
I think that there was the thought that Zipra and Zanla had now taken the turn, that all that ammunition would fall into those forces and it would be a threat to South Africa. So they wanted to get rid of all of that stuff. Because also at Intimbani, another thing that happened there, we had, I think, 2 companies there fighting in Intimbani, and Ian Hogg, once again, he called me in and he said to me, "Listen, you're the best person I know that can fire an RPG-7. Go to," it was again in Coma barracks before it was blown up, and I went and collected as many rockets and launchers as I could. I was given a crocodile, went and loaded up all that equipment, and then drove out to New Sarum, and there was a Dakota waiting for me, and I was flown to Bulawayo and landed there, met with by an escort, and taken to Bulawayo barracks, police barracks, and I trained all my guys, support unit guys, in the use of the RPG-7 because we were getting stomped quite badly, and they went in with the RPG-7s, and it turned the battle for the support unit. So, yeah, that was another thing that happened.
Sorry, I'm a bit confused. Which battle was that you had the RPG?
Intimbani 1 and 2.
Oh, right, you were involved in those.
Yes.
I've done 1.5 talks plus I did an audio presentation on that battle. I don't know if you've seen or listened to it.
I spent a couple of days up there helping the guys out, and then went to get back again. But I was purely there as training commander, and but because the troops got on with him. I think Daryl Brent was there, and there was another troop that was there. Lima troop was there, and another one, but I can't remember now. But the guys had a rough time there until we brought in that extra firepower.
I've often wondered, I've asked this of Wayne Stevenson, who spoke about Intimbani. Maybe we should have fought with the Zipra guys, and I don't know if things would have been different, but that's not worth dwelling on, really, is it?
Yeah, well, I mean, Lionel Dyke nearly got taken out there with that battle, and he was with RAR then, I think, or would it be? It would have been RAR,
yeah,
or 1 parachute battalion, but he was down to very low ammunition, and I believe support unit guys went in to resupply him. Yeah, Lionel and myself ran many marathons together, and did British amateur athletics coaching courses together. Yeah,
I can sense through your character nature that you're that type of person. The guy who wants to run away from home and join the army and all that sort of stuff. You've obviously got a very adventurous spirit.
It's like my life here in Mafeking, where I've ended up for 25 years. I was head of security for the whole of Northwest Province, for all the parks.
Oh,
And I did the first capture of the lions for Pilanesberg National Park, the first capture of spotted hyenas that we took to Madikwe Game Reserve. We've translocated all sorts, and then I ended up my last years up from. I retired in 2013 from Parks Board, and those 8 years preceding that, I was involved in all the counter poaching operations of the rhinos, and ended up doing all the autopsies and all the crime scenes, which it was terrible, horrible. But yeah, those are my passions as well as my rhinos. I just love those animals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple of questions have been hanging over my head through the whole interview. What made you, a policeman in a relatively cushy uniform job, want to go into the bush for support unit away from a wife? I don't know if you had a kid at that point. That must have been quite a contentious move with your wife. Did she get upset by that?
Nan has always been behind whatever I've done, and I mean, at one stage when we were at Featherstone, she became a woman police reservist, and when we were sent to Featherstone, and that was the year that we were married and we had our first child, and Featherstone had nothing. There was no electricity, paraffin fridges, and stuff like that. So it was a real eye opener for us, and so she, because of lack of staff that we had, she ran my radio communications and supervised my ground coverage operations. And the things that we got up to, and she was always behind. And my eldest daughter was with us all the time. I recall an incident where we were working on ground coverage maps, and the next minute, Mr. Ian Hogg, who was OC ground coverage at that time, walked into my office unannounced, and we were plotting routes on the maps and all the rest of it. And he said, "Oh, Hustler, I've just popped in to have a quick inspection."
Huh?
But he was such a fabulous guy that, and I eventually got a commendation from the commissioner for my ground coverage work. But it's I was brought up in my dad was in the Second World War in the Royal Navy. My uncle was in the Second World War in the Army in signals. My grandfather was in the Royal Navy. So I'd been brought up in a military come police environment all my life. And when I went to do my national service, my initial instinct was, when SAS came round to Llewellyn Barracks, I took their application form and applied, but my father wouldn't sign my papers. And before that, when we were over in Britain in 1963, my dad and mom came from Britain. My dad was from Leeds and my mom was from Glasgow. And she was in the Wrens, married. They'd been married for like 6 months, her first husband, and he was killed in when his ship struck a German mine near Crete. So I followed up a lot of history in our family, but when we were over in 63, which was the last time that I went over to Britain in terms of with my mum and dad, I applied to do boy service with the Royal Marines. And because then you could go and finish off your schooling and do boy service, and then eventually get into the do the Royal Marine proper. And he said to me, "Look, son, come back home and finish your GCE, and then we can talk about it." And that, but there was always that sense of me wanting to go into the or be in the military. And I enjoyed PARTU tremendously. And one of the instructors that I had in Kwekwe, trying to remember his name now, but he was ex Royal Marine, and he said to me, he had been watching me doing my tactics and things like that, and he said to me, "Rusty, you wasted. in the police force, in duty uniform branch and stuff like that, or district branch. He said, you must go to support unit. And he eventually was one of my instructors when I went to do my support unit training. And he was the guy that set a charge off and blew. I've got retinitis in my, or dermatitis or something in my ears, the constant ringing, because during the training, he set off a 250-gram charge of explosive. And I was quite close to it, and it blew my ears quite badly.
Yeah, I've got
but
too, yeah.
But it's always been in there that I wanted, and as I say, Nan has followed me through thick and thin. Even when my second child was born, I was on deployment, and there were a couple of complications, and Jimmy Collins got hold of me and sent me straight back, flew me in by chopper. And when my eldest daughter also, she was on the farm, because my wife comes from the farming stock in Belingwe. My eldest child jumped into a fire, and she was badly burnt and had third-degree burns.
Wow.
And during that time, he also flew me into Salisbury, to make sure that she was fine. He was a tremendous commander as well, Jimmy Collins. Yeah.
Last question on support unit. Were the families moved into Shamba? You know, the scouts had all the families come and live with them. Was that the case there as well?
No, Shamba, that was the battle camp.
Right.
And that was we would go out for a week and just leave a holding team there. But Chickarubi was a complete camp with a store, and all the guys lived there. They moved from Tomlinson Depot, and we all moved to Chickarubi. We had our married quarters there. We had our single quarters, our pubs. You must see it now. I don't recognize it anymore from that time. But we had our big parade square there, and as I say, the assault courses and all the rest of it. That opened up in around about 1978, because we lived in Mablerain when I first joined the unit, and then we got one of the first married quarters in Chickarubi. So we lived in Chickarubi for quite a number of years, and it was fantastic. We had tennis courts and swimming pool, and it was a lovely place. Yeah.
Just very quickly, maybe 5 minutes before we close, the Botswana Defence Force, why did you do that, and how did you rate the Botswanan soldiers?
Bophuthatswana,
Oh,
not Botswana.
It
was the Bophuthatswana Defence Force. Ostensibly, it was an arm of the South African Defence Force, although we were one of the legitimised homelands. They were good. They were good troops, and I got on well with them. And the facts, I was brought in. I did 3 years as the training commander of the Bophuthatswana Police Training College, and that was a 3-year contract. And during that time, I was on a National Key Points Committee, and one of the officers from the Army was on that committee, and he recruited me to come into the Defence Force when my contract, but ostensibly to be a sports officer, because I was running comrades and training guys in running and stuff. And when I got to the Army, he then said, yeah, but you've got another task, and that's SO3 processing, which is military intelligence, which I didn't like. But his name was Colonel Lamprecht, and he was an expert or a parabat. And when our general decided to form a parabat unit, my colonel turned around and he said, Hustler, I was then a major. He said, Major Hustler's going on that course, and he actually gave me his parabat boots, which I've still got. And that was the be all and end all of everything. Was when President Mongopi pinned my wings on chest, and yeah, that it was fantastic. And I was the oldest on the PT phase of the course. I was 44 at the time when I did my wings, so it was unheard of. But yes, they were good troops. Yeah.
What a fascinating story, and what surprises me, and what I really enjoy talking about as well, is the experiences Rhodesians got up to after the army. I mean, some of them are phenomenal. It's just
Yes,
such
yes.
incredibly diverse lives. I think, I don't know if foreign viewers get sick of us saying that we're unique, but I think we are, because we've got this innate drive in us. Maybe it comes from our pioneering stock. I don't know. I mean, my relatives go right back to the Cape in the 1800s. It's that constant striving to, I think it gets into your blood. I don't know what it is.
There's definitely something about I mean, even now, on the groups that we on, and there's still a good bond there between, especially the unit guys.
Yeah.
The brown boots, as we call them. We believe that we were a cut above them because of our discipline. Our discipline was a lot harder than the brown boots. And we had to be because we were a fighting unit. I mean, that Totoweer and that Enclovo, they on that one incident in Rhodesia Mountain, they would go off and they would go and forage for mapani worms, and they'd come back with mapani worms, and they'd say, "Ishe, come, let's have a special supper tonight." And we'd have mapani worms with ratback margarine and salt and pepper and stuff. And those two guys, they did a bit of a binge. We were in Wedza TTL on a patrol, and they did a bit of a binge at a shebeen, and I caught them. And the sergeant major said to me, he said, "Ishe, Totoweer and Enclovo are in the shit, eh? They deep in the shit." So I said, "Well, call them in." And I said to them, "Totoweer and Enclovo, you're in my stick. Now you either accept my punishment or you go back to 151 to Chikarubi, and you'll get the punishment there." They said, "Ishe, we will take your punishment." I said, "Right." And we had a hill in the middle of the camp there. And I put sandbags on their shoulders, and I made them run from 6 until 6. They finished running, and they came back. They saluted me, and they said, "Thank you, Ishe. We understand. We will never, ever do that again." And Totoweer, both of them were killed, unfortunately. Later on, when there was a company, Charlie Company, they were killed in a housing incident in one of the townships in Salisbury. But I don't want to talk about that.
No.
I lost two very good men. Yeah.
Last question for our foreign viewers: what does the word Ishe mean?
Ishe is it's a sign of respect. Ishe, like the boss, chief. Yeah.
Right.
But the troops in support unit always used it. It was a sign of respect. Yeah. Ishe.
Rusty, it's been a very interesting interview, and I thank you for coming forward, and I hope this encourages other people to do the same. We need to gather up our history and keep it ensconced somewhere. So thank you for taking part in this, and I wish you all the very best for your future.
Thank you very much indeed, Tony. It's been a pleasure talking to you as well. And yeah, I'll see if I can't get some of the other guys to have a chat with you.
Please do. Thank you very much. Every talk is the thread in the tapestry. Thanks, sir.
Yeah. Okay then. All right, Tony.
Take care. God bless.
Have a good evening. Okay then.
Bye-bye.